Welcome to Messy Christian Mamas. We are three Christian moms with a progressive mindset and loving hearts and minds. We are imperfect humans, but we're all loved in God's sight. At some point, we've all felt like the church and Christianity may not have been for us, but God isn't looking for perfection. He's just looking for you.
We are not experts in Christian theology, and we do not represent any particular Christian faith or church. We are simply here to be authentic, and we hope you join us on this journey.
Hello, welcome back to Messy Christian Mamas. We're glad you're with us today. I'm Kendra.
I'm Kaylee.
And I'm Ashley.
We have a really interesting topic, I think, to talk about today, but I have to say, you guys, I'm so exhausted. We just started back at preschool last week, and I only do this 3 days a week. Why am I so tired?
Teacher tired. You are now
Because you have toddlers. Toddlers are exhausting. I think
Adorable,
toddlers,
adorable.
they're adorable, but they're like, I think the CIA should use toddlers for to break terrorists.
That's a really
Because
good idea.
I think, because you can't get mad at a toddler because they're so freaking cute, but they're annoying as heck.
Try to get them
And
all
they
to
will
sit
break
down at a
you.
table at the same time.
Exactly. It's like hurting feral cats.
Right.
That's what it's like. So if you put like three toddlers that don't really speak well in a room with a terrorist, I think he'll break a lot faster than CIA
Have you guys seen the new
interrogations.
Garfield movie?
No.
They have a really great portrayal of toddlers.
Oh, that's great.
It's so funny.
I should watch it.
Yeah.
That might prepare you.
Right.
But all of our kids also started back to all their activities last week too, right?
Yeah.
Everything. So how are you guys feeling?
We're settling in.
Yeah, we're
I'm feeling
settling
okay.
in. Yeah.
That's good.
It's nice because I now have like chunks of time in the afternoon to myself, which is delightful.
That's great.
It's so nice.
So Liv hasn't started back to school yet,
Are
but
you guys still trying to figure out what y'all are doing, or?
a little bit, yeah. We've got a little bit longer still before we're going to. We're going to start after Labor Day, but we really need to get on that very quickly. But funny enough, last week, and you know this, I think, she announced to the church music class she has a new name.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys heard about
Yeah,
this?
because Ashley's daughter had the best response to it in the entire world. Goes to Charlotte. Do you prefer Charlotte or Charlie? Oh, I prefer Charlotte. Goes to Addison. Do you prefer Addie or Addison? It's okay. I don't care either way. It goes to Olivia.
Typical
Would you-
Addie response.
Right.
Would you prefer Olivia or Lynn? She goes, actually, I would prefer Via and Addison without skipping a beat. Since when? I was literally dying. They couldn't see me, and I was crying, laughing. And then Charlotte in the car later was like, I don't know if this name thing's going to work out, Mom. And I was like, why? She's like, well, Mr. Peterson kept saying Via, Via, Via in Olivia wasn't answering. I finally had to elbow her and be like, he's talking to you.
Larry told me the same thing. He said, I can't tell you how many times I called her by that name, and she's looking around before she realized it was her.
Oh, I just like, this is her probably like fourth or fifth reinvention this year, and it's only August. Like, that's why
Here we
I'm
go.
like,
Yeah. She's so great.
her imagination just cracks me.
Definitely wants to be an individual, so I can't blame her for that.
No,
Yeah,
I think
wonderful. No,
I think it's great.
Yeah.
I think she just needs to keep a file of facts of the representations that she's
Right.
doing, and kind of like have like a cheat sheet of like what personality she's representing at that
She
time.
has tried to tote this one out before, and I don't think it
Oh.
took, so it got recycled.
So she
and
was
thrown
like,
back out
wait,
again.
now, now I'm being asked, so let me use it now.
It's my chance.
Oh man, hilarious.
Anyway, so our conversation today is not about my daughter's name reinventions, but it's actually about this awesome book that I really liked this book. I thought it was fantastic. It's called Unchristian. It's by Dave Kinnaman and Gabe Lyons. And this book came into my life from a previous podcast guest, friend of the show, Carol Axford, who was on our episode about church shopping. She leads the Bible study group after the church service that the three of us attend. And this was a topic in that Bible study a couple weeks ago. And she invited us to join that conversation and chat about next steps around that. And so it really got me thinking about a lot of things that you don't always get a chance to talk about in Bible study because there's a lot of other conversations happening there.
Well, I think for the most part, Bible study usually is just that. It's like the study of the Bible. And whereas this open door Sunday school class really much is like trying to find other topics and how do we branch out from just this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really fantastic
it's such a great
Bible study, but it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's such a great mix of generations and
so
backgrounds.
multi-generational.
And it's awesome. I thoroughly enjoy listening to everyone's different perspectives.
Totally agree.
Same.
Yeah. So anyway, this book, it's a really fascinating book. It was, I'll talk a little bit about it. So the author's Dave Kinnaman, he is president of the Barna Group. The Barna Group provides research and resources, that facilitate spiritual transformation in people's lives. So they basically do Christian research on a lot of different things. So since joining Barna in 1995, Dave has designed and analyzed nearly 500 studies for a variety of churches, nonprofits, and corporations. And Gabe Lyons, he actually worked for Kinnaman at the Barna Group. And when he handed in his resignation, he told Kinnaman he was starting a company and wanted to commission a study from Barna to better understand the perception of Christianity. And so that really kicked off this book and this journey between the two of them.
It was written in 2007,
I think, right?
So.
Yeah. Yeah, and so the premise of the book is that Christianity has an image problem. And I think if you're listening to this podcast, certainly the three of us have encountered that at different points in our lives. And if you're listening to this podcast, it's very likely you have too. If you're a Christian, it's very likely that you've encountered the idea that Christianity has an image problem. There were 5 key observations at the beginning of the book that I thought that I would just quickly discuss. So the term outsiders is used in this book, and outsiders in this book means or includes atheists, agnostics, those affiliated with a faith other than Christianity, like Islam, Hinduism, Judaism, Mormonism, etc., and other unchurched, I'm using air quotes, unchurched adults who are not born again. Kinnaman focuses on 2 primary generations. The first one is Mosaics, which were born between 1984 and 2002, which makes them aged 22 to 40. And Busters, which were born between 1965 and 1983, so they would be aged 41 to 59 now. So one thing here, the outsiders we've got, as well as these 2 generations that he focused his conversation around. And some other observations that he made in this book. God wants us to pay attention to outsiders because he cares for them. So thus the term outsiders. Christianity's image problem is both outside and inside the church among young people, which I thought was an interesting observation. It's not just people outside of the church. It's not just non-Christians. It's also people who are inside of the church, that young people inside the church that are seeing this issue. People are upset about the Christian faith because of its real and perceived influence on culture. Pretty self-explanatory there. And this book is something of a mirror for each of us as Christians, which I think is a really fair point. It's definitely a call to look at ourselves and examine how unchristian or Christian we are in our lives.
Yeah.
So the research, I thought this was interesting. I couldn't find a really clear answer on how the research was done. It's basically a market study that was conducted across people aged 16 to 29 primarily, but I couldn't find out a lot more information about it than that. So I scoured, but I couldn't really find that. So I thought that was kind of interesting for a research group. Maybe they don't want to reveal anything too proprietary, but there's that.
Yeah, I don't like that.
But didn't care for that. So just putting it out there.
Right.
And there are a lot of findings, a lot of really good findings that, I mean, I'm saying good findings. It's because they line up with a lot of the ideas that I also have
Right.
about Christianity's image problems. So they're very solid, in my opinion.
But I think that is a really good point that, like, I do think research needs to be, like, peer reviewed. There needs to be, like, a process with it. I talked a lot about the anxious generation with you guys earlier, and I there's a lot of ideas in that book that I agree with, and I think the mass public agrees with, but the research I think is not stringent enough, and so I think that's important for books.
Well, I think it's like anytime people try to use the Bible to justify their opinions. Like anyone can find an opinion that will anyone can find a quote unquote fact or a story from a verse or a website that's going to back up their personal opinions. So to me, because this was a Christian research group and that was their goal of the research, is kind of like, well, you're going to find what you want to find.
Right.
So it'd be interested to see if there were other research being done at the time by non-Christian groups that coincide. Now, I think on this topic, it probably does coincide pretty well. I think the opinion hasn't changed in the last 20 years about Jesus being good and Christianity being bad. I think it's still an image problem that we're seeing today, the same as we did in 2007. So I think the core of the research is probably correct, but like the
problem
numbers
isn't with the
and
Christ,
stuff,
it's with the Christians.
Yeah. The numbers are probably, I don't know, like looking at the numbers, like when you say things like majority and things like that probably matches up.
Yeah.
So the findings, should we get into some of the findings? Kaylee has some updated numbers too here that I would love for her to talk about, but just sort of an overview of to non-Christians, what they think Christians are. I'm not going to get into data, actually, because I want to focus most of our conversation on what we think the solutions are and how we move forward. But the findings here are non-Christians say that Christians are, one, hypocritical, that we say one thing and we do another. We've all encountered this in non-Christians and Christians alike, probably more so in a lot of Christians. Yeah. And even I've found it in myself at times too, which is not something that I love. That Christians are too focused on getting converts. I don't really think this is as much a Lutheran issue. I don't know. Maybe at least in our synod, I haven't found it.
I think it's just because Lutheranism isn't like super popular in the area that we live.
Okay, that's
I think
fair.
Maybe if we lived in the Midwest, like when we were talking to Pastor Brian, who was like Milwaukee and Minneapolis and these like really centers of Lutheranism, that might be different. Yeah, and how they're focusing on building up and everything.
Well,
but
I'm actually curious about this for you because you went to a pretty mega church, a satellite location of a mega church, and did you find that to be true there?
Not really, just because I didn't see so much a focus on bringing in new people. It was mostly like trying to retain the people they had. And that might be the fact because it is already well established. Mm-hmm. Like maybe I would have felt different if it was a newer satellite.
But I'm sure that mega church scouted out Peachtree City and decided
for sure
this is the place where we can get the most people.
Oh, for sure. And like church planting, they're going to go where the interest is and everything like that. So, for sure. Like when they opened the Henry County, branch over, there are people who were traveling from Henry County to Peachtree City in order to go. So that made sense to move there. And they had enough of a Fayetteville, like when they opened the Fayetteville branch, there was enough of an interest and everything. So yeah, you're going to go where the money is and you're going to go where there's interest and everything like that. But by the time I had gotten to Southside, they had already been pretty well established for over a decade. So I don't think so much it was, and they had such a strong children's and youth ministry that was retaining their numbers.
It's smart.
Yeah. So it was one of these things where, they did think about, how do we keep our memberships? We'll focus on youth ministry so that they come back when they're adults. So it made sense. I didn't really feel like a pledge drive. Like I didn't feel like there wasn't constantly like go out and bring people. Only Easter and Christmas, but it's the same we do here.
I heard that and hopefully if anyone that's listening knows that this is wrong, please correct me. But my understanding, from what I've heard from others, is that the Missouri Synod of the Lutheran Church, one of their models for when they plant churches is they very quickly establish a preschool and they put a lot of resource into that preschool.
Oh, interesting.
And that's how they get people into their church.
Families.
It's so smart, right?
Yeah.
It's so smart. Like
Yeah,
we have a
it
preschool
definitely
too, but
makes
it's not like that. It's not the same sort of thing from what I understand. Like the
When
Missouri
you
Synod
look
really
at
works
when
it.
you look at churches that have really strong preschools, it did make those families go there because they're already going there 5 days a week. They might as well show up on a Sunday. So
Absolutely.
and they have a community that they've already built. And so
Yeah, it makes so much sense. So converts, maybe not as much in our Synod of the Lutheran Church, but definitely it's an issue that we know others are experiencing in the broader world of Christianity. Non-Christians say that Christians are homophobic, that Christians are bigoted and show disdain for gays and lesbians, among others, amongst the rainbow. Like our church is
an exception.
a little spot in the middle of Christianity that is a very big exception to that, I think. Most of the Christians I know are not accepting and embracing of
If
the
anything,
rainbow.
they might be tolerant, but
That's why I say accepting and not,
Right.
yeah.
Which is hard to tell until you're like in there and you get to really know people.
Right? I mean, Kayla, your experience in your old church is such a perfect example of that.
for sure. Like it was,
They want you in the congregation
they
because they want the numbers, but
they want your offering.
Yeah.
They want your tithe. But as far as like going kind of above and beyond that, now I haven't been there since things have changed.
Sure.
And from the people I've spoken to, there has been quite a few changes made, and that's great.
That's wonderful.
And I'm glad to hear that because I feel like that was the direction it needed to go anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think for the most part, that's a fair assumption. And if you look on the news and what's being preached and shouted at everyone, it very much is this: we only accept this type. We don't accept all.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Non-Christians think that Christians are sheltered, that they're old-fashioned, boring, and out of touch with reality. Sure, there are a lot of Christians that are that way.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people.
Sometimes I'm boring and out of touch with reality. I'll admit it.
Fair. Really good way to ground us all. Shove that mirror right in our faces, actually.
I don't know. Actually, I don't know if it's so fair to say out of touch with reality. I think it's like you're entrenched in reality. You're out of touch with like pop culture. Like you know, like what's important. Like
And it's not on TikTok.
you're aware of like what's going on in your immediate surroundings. And then Kendra and I come in and I'm like, oh my god, did you hear this? And you're like, what? Or we're like,
I'm just
There's something that is
we're singing a song and you're like,
it's objectively not important. Yeah.
We're like, we want to do this TikTok idea, and Asha's like, I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
Skibidi toilet from middle school. Anyway.
Sheltered. Okay, we'll go with that. Too political. That Christians are too political. They promote.
Change it all.
I know they promote and represent politically conservative interests and issues.
If anything, I think that has gotten worse.
Aggressively worse.
Since 2007. I mean, the rise of Christian nationalism
is scary.
For sure.
It really
a
is.
last decade thing. So I'm sure the people in 2007 that were like, oh, Christians are really conservative, political, are now sitting there being like, oh my God, guys, this wasn't a dare. We're trying to get you to double down on it.
Yeah, I know. I'm really proud of our bishop for speaking up about that.
Yeah. For sure.
Non-Christians say that Christians are judgmental. People doubt that we really love people as we say we do. I mean, when you look at this list, of course, why wouldn't they doubt it?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they doubt it? And it's, I've had a lot of hesitation I have like 1 million different social media accounts for the different things that I'm doing. And some of them are Christian things that I'm doing. So I'll post like Christian content there, but then have been really hesitant to post Christian content under my name accounts. And, I finally gotten better about it. I would say I've come to a better place where I'm more ready to defend my Christianity, not in an aggressive, not in an aggressive way, but in a more loving way. And it's interesting. I've shared, I shared the Christian nationalism thing from the bishop recently, and someone who I didn't know was a Christian came back to me saying oh, this is really, really interesting. I totally agree with this. I was check out the ELCA. Started listing all of these very non-Christian, non-conservative values that the ELCA has, and they were like,
I'll get back to your point.
Really,
when we start looking at this new research, I'll get back to your point about social media.
Okay.
And kind of from a personal,
I would love that.
Taking a personal accountability.
Well, that's really the end of the list. I would say that of these, the three biggest complaints based on the research was the homophobia. 91% of young outsiders cited homophobia. Being judgmental, 87% of them cited judgmental. Hypocritical, 85% of them cited hypocritical. And Kinnaman observes that many of these same negative perceptions are shared by young people who have remained in the church.
Yeah.
It tracks. I mean, when you look at the direction that culture is heading, and I talk about the fluidity of gender all of the time, and how a lot of people are uncomfortable with this idea that gender is becoming more fluid, and it will only become more fluid. It's so funny. We probably will lose the idea of gender within the next 50 years, I think. I don't think that gender will mean the same thing at all that it does today.
Well, it doesn't mean the same thing now that it did 100 years ago.
Changed
It's already
Absolutely
changed. I mean, we can see that just by the show we went and saw how women were regarded and treated, and how that's changed since now. So the new research. So I stuck with Barna just because the book was Barna research. I wanted to stick with Barna. So there was an article posted in March 17th, 2023, so St. Patty's Day. And it says, open to Jesus is no problem, church is the problem. And so it kind of goes with this, what we were just talking about. And 71% of the people that were, I guess, polled have a positive outlook on Jesus. See him as a good guy.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, see him as a good guy. See the Bible as a holy book, and has a good guidelines in it and everything. And then out of those 71%, 48% said that they just thought that the church was judgmental and hypocritical. So you're looking at you're still looking at those numbers. You're still looking at a big chunk of people still seeing the church and Christians in general as hypocritical and judgmental. And that is definitely, I think, something that is being reflected right here.
Oh, thank you.
Something that's being reflected. And so it's really sad to think that 20 years later, we haven't improved the image that much. And the people who were what was the two groups?
The mosaics
and busters. So I would have been considered a mosaic back then. So my generation is now, they're millennials. So now we're almost 20 years older.
I'm a buster.
And so it's really 20 years older, and we haven't really, this is how we felt 20 years ago. And it's still this view. So it's kind of one of these things where I'm like, well, how much responsibility are millennials now taking of this and saying, we're the majority of America. Millennials make up the biggest percentage of American adults. How much of this are we going to start taking responsibility for and saying, hey, we thought this 20 years ago, it's still being reflected this way. We need to take ownership of this. And what can we do to change it?
But are millennials the largest portion of Christians?
So the research showed that out of church-going adults, millennials made up about 40%.
Interesting.
That's a big chunk.
That's a big chunk.
That's a huge chunk. Now, boomers are still way up there. They're still, I think, like 45%.
Yeah.
So they're still edging us out. Gen X.
I didn't realize millennials were that.
Gen X is about 25%. So you have quite a big dip.
Well, it was so much smaller.
Yeah, so 25%. And then you have Gen Z, which, I mean, you have this focus on youth ministry and everything like that. So Gen Z is making up about 20%.
Yeah.
So you look at Gen Z, who is such a an action-oriented generation. Like, they are such a ambitious generation. And then you have millennials, and we're tired. We've been through a lot. But we do make a very large chunk of this. So if we really wanted to, we should have enough power to make a change, to make a difference. And I just don't know what is stopping that.
Yeah.
I'm curious too, with like the sample of like who they surveyed with this, like the socioeconomics of it. Like, were they white middle class people that were surveyed for this, or is it like a wider sample? You know, because in my experience, depending on what community you're in, like religion can be viewed differently.
It's wildly differently.
Yeah. Like, I think like in our community that it can be used as like a status symbol, a social symbol. And in other communities I've been in, it was not so much that way, where we're in a pretty high socioeconomic environment here.
Well, I think like the research trends were showing that non-white minorities church attendance was going up, which is post-pandemic, which is great, obviously, and that African Americans very much associate religion with their culture. It is such a deep part of their culture and their upbringing and everything. And even if they're no longer going to church, they still identify as a Christian because it was such a part of their upbringing and childhood. So you do see this trend. But again, if it's socioeconomic and it's, upper middle class, conservative white churches that are holding the power reins of society and saying, well, this is how we're going to dictate how things go, you do have more of these grassroots that are kind of getting choked out. They're kind of being ignored and choked out because they just don't have enough momentum to really keep, get things rolling, get the ball rolling. And hopefully that will change, especially as these newer generations that are so ambitious and are so action oriented, hopefully they do start to think first before acting, because I think that's been a lot of the issues. But
I also feel like millennials have grown up with so much social media in their lives that your social media is very much about your identity, right? Who you are, how you want to portray yourself. Millennials are more like brand cognizant, I think, than any other generation, just how they position themselves on social media. And I wonder, because of the image problem of Christianity and because of what a fantastic, truly fantastic, like round of applause for conservative America and how they have owned Christianity. Well done from a marketing perspective, like true case study. Well done.
That was executed
pretty brilliantly.
Pretty well.
And so for millennials, I could see, especially liberal millennials, where there would be a real hesitance to lead any kind of mission to say X, Y, or Z about Christianity because of that. It's a real challenge to go out there and have yourself aligned with this identity issue that exists with Christianity.
Something I really grapple with is that Christianity has been used to do such horrific things throughout the ages. And that's really hard to be like, to align yourself with something that's been used so horribly over and over and over again.
A mechanism of control. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was the other article that I looked at, was how to have conversations with non-Christians, like outsiders, I guess, for the unchristian. And so the research, again, this is Barna Group, so we don't know like the numbers, I don't know, or we can take them with a grain of salt. But it says, 77% of U.S. adults believe in God as a divine being. May not believe in the Holy Trinity, may not believe, but they believe in God and the divine creator. And then 44% are more open to Jesus and God post-pandemic than they were pre-pandemic, which is great. You had a lot of time to think during the pandemic. So one of the things that they were talking
and maybe
about,
almost die too.
Yeah.
There's
near-death experiences.
Right.
Maybe you start to believe a little bit more.
Right.
Isolation.
Right.
So they kind of put out this thing about like how to have conversation as a Christian with non-Christians or outsiders or people who are questioning faith or going through a faith crisis. And this is something that I have very, very much have taken ownership of in my own life because of all the people in my life that I currently have in my life. And there's three things that they suggest. And one of this, spiritual openness represents common ground. So instead of focusing on differences between the two of you, try to find the common ground that you guys share. So instead of saying, well, I believe this, and then they go, well, I believe this, and you start picking little things apart about why they're different. Okay, well, what are some common ground things that we can see? Do we both believe in one supreme God? Do we both believe that Jesus Christ was resurrected? Let's find these little bits of, because it's easier to connect with someone when you have a common ground with someone. But when you are entrench yourselves, there's a no man's land. You can't cross it. So it says, and then a lot of people say there has to be give and take. So prioritize listening over just speaking, sharing your story and saying, okay, tell me about your spiritual journey, and really listening and really trying to find where and meet that person where it is. We've talked about this so much in different groups and podcasts that we've done about meeting people where they are instead of expecting them to come to us, come to a church building, come to a service, come to a Bible study. Instead of them making the effort, why are we not meeting people more where the church in general, I'm not talking about us, but the church in general, why are we not meeting people where they are? And that goes into the third thing about actions speaking louder than words. We know based on political ads alone, what we're being shouted on 24/7. We're being blasted with one opinion, one set of rules, one version, and it's just being shouted and shouted. And it's hard to ignore something that is constantly being shouted at you. But if you're seeing something that's different, if you're being shouted something on YouTube, but then you see people acting differently in your own community, it's easier to ignore what's being shouted at you. So if you're being told Christianity is this, Christianity is this, Christianity hates gays and Christians hate minorities and Christians hate this, but yet in your community, you see churches and Christians reaching out and really trying to blend lines and reach across the table, and their actions are speaking so much louder than what's being shouted, I think that makes a huge difference. And I just don't think enough of that is being seen. It's so easily to cover up the good with the bad.
I totally agree with that.
Because there's so much more. Like there's so much more bad than there is good. But we know personally what good is being done. We have it in our own church. We have it in our own synod. We have it, and there's other churches in this area. Like the Summer of Sack Lunch program was 27 different churches working together to feed over 140 kids in our own county. Like that, you want to talk about bridging gaps and going across the aisle? Like you had Lutherans working with Mormons, working with Jewish synagogues. Like that's the type of unity that people need to see and be exposed to.
It's so true. Like speaking of the political ads that are shouting at us, I mean, they're just shouting divisiveness. We talked about this on our 4th of July episode too, right? That there's so many more similarities between us than there are differences. The differences, the delta seems vast, unfortunately, but we have so many similarities, and this terrible political machine, whatever side of the aisle that you're on, just wants to tell us why we should hate, loathe, despise the other side. And
it's awful.
And it goes directly against what Christ preached.
Yeah.
Right.
Like directly against, and that is what I can't seem to like make heads or tails of. Because I'm like, how are you getting this? Like, how are you even coming up with this? How are you taking the red words that are in the New Testament and saying this is what we're taught and this is what we believe? That's not what we're
This
taught.
is who we are.
This is not what we believe. Like, what are you talking about? Like,
and it's so hard to see too, like some people that you know them in real life and they're kind and they're caring people, but then they'll put something that's just full of vitriol on their social media and you're like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's painful.
I mean, we've talked about, like, there are certain issues that I don't try to get involved in because I very much try to come to the table with an open mind and an open heart and try to find common ground. But I know there are certain issues that people are deeply entrenched in that I'm just not willing to get into a debate with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not willing to be shouted at. I'm not willing to, you're not going to change my mind. I'm not going to change your mind. So to me, it's a waste of effort and time to try to get you to see my side because all you're doing is shouting at me. You're not willing to listen to me and you're not willing to even see my side of the story or try to find a common point in what we both believe.
I'm so not in that era. I am not here for trying to change someone's mind right now. That is really not where I'm
just
at.
like, it's exhausting.
That makes me so tired to just think about that idea.
But if someone was to put something, and I've done this, and it really depends on the person too, because like you said, there are people that you have a relationship with and you have a discord with that maybe sometimes they'll post something and you're just like, hey, I just want to know why you posted this. I want to know what your real feelings are. You just sharing something that caught your eye? Because it's happened. Like, I have very conservative members of my family that have shared something without watching the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, and I watched the whole thing and then I'm like, did you see the end of this? Because that's not what you believe. And then they go back and they're like, oh crap. And they apologize and they delete. And so sometimes I think depends on who it is. Like, because as a family member, you have to love me no matter what. So I don't care. So I will approach you and be like, hey, you posted this. And I'm just a little curious about, and trying not to come off as offensive or defensive or attacking them. I'm just curious about why you posted this. Like, why do you feel this way? And people have come to me. Now, I try to stay very neutral on my social media because I don't like confrontation. So I do try to stay pretty neutral. But I have people come to me and say, hey, we know that you think this, or we know, can you explain why you think this or why it is that you believe this? Yeah. And you know, when we start talking about Old Testament, there's a lot of things about the Old Testament that I won't get into a debate about because I'm like,
so
you don't want to know my personal opinion about this.
Right.
So I'm not willing to go to that with you on this because to me, I am a New Testament Christian who believes in Christ's words. Like, that's what I believe in. I don't, like, everything else to me is kind of superfluous. Like, it's not necessary for my faith.
Well, and also, like, we don't speak Hebrew.
No,
we don't. Like, how can we even? There are some people out there that say, like, the only version of the Bible that you should ever follow is the King James translation.
And we know you shouldn't because they made up dragons and unicorns.
You're right.
Well, that was to balance out how much they hate the gays, though. Remember?
Yeah, that's true.
The one guy was like, we hate the gays.
And they're like, we'll give you a unicorn.
Let's unicorns. Yeah. We got to soften him up a little bit. So I did want to jump back to this one anecdote from the book about being sheltered, because I think this one is really interesting, and it wasn't like one of the main three takeaways based on the data, but I think it's a really, really pivotal one for Christians, and I think the three of us might find ourselves in this group too. So it says, in the interviews, a 28-year-old Christian described this lifestyle. So many Christians are caught up in the Christian subculture and are completely closed off from the world. We go to church on Wednesdays, Sundays, and sometimes Saturdays. We attend small group on Tuesday night and serve on the Sunday School Advisory Board, the Financial Committee, and the Welcoming Committee. We go to barbecues with our Christian friends and plan group outings. We are closed off from the world. Even if we wanted to reach out to non-Christians, we don't have time and we don't know how. The only way we know how to reach out is to invite people to join in our Christian social circle.
Oh, interesting.
It is interesting, right? I feel like, of course, we know some ways how to go outside of our groups, but when you are so scheduled, I mean, Ashley, you have 1 million children, and and I know just with mine now, I sometimes feel, Kaylee, your child is so heavily involved in so many different things.
Yeah, that's why for me it's hard to relate to that.
Okay.
Because I do have so many other outlets.
But I was thinking
besides
my
just
other
here.
friend groups, like they're also Christian too.
I know. I mean, my best friend isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's one of these things where I think I've kept in touch with so many different parts, like past lives that I've had, and different outlets and everything. Now, obviously, the majority of the people I know are Christian, but a lot of them go to other places, and we connect on other platforms.
Well,
and everything.
you're an extrovert too. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I
Maybe
mean,
you don't
I
count
say,
this conversation.
right.
Maybe this is a shelter thing. It should be like introverts versus extroverts, because the shelter thing might be more because you're comfortable. You like if this is a place where you're comfortable and
It's
you have
interesting.
commonality.
It's saying about reaching out. Like to me, I interpret that as like reaching out to talk to them about my faith, or talk to them about me being Christian, and that like I am friends with people that are that are not Christian, and I don't make it a priority to talk about how I'm Christian with them. So yeah,
I think I kind of get it in the part as like reaching out and inviting them, because I do feel like this is something that we've talked about a lot, and I do feel like this is a direction that a lot of I feel that the three of us are being pulled pretty strongly in, is how to connect with outsiders and kind of expose what our faith actually is, and who Jesus actually is. And I think we this church is a pretty good job of having non-scary events that are not so entrenched in Christian tradition, like Oktoberfest.
Join us at Oktoberfest.
Yeah, to me, that's a perfect our hops and hymns. These are really good examples, I think, of no pressure ways of saying, hey, if you're curious or you want to just hang out and get to know some people and have a good time, and hear a lesson, but it's not going to be forced down your throat. These are some great opportunities that we have. So we're very lucky at the church that we have we have stuff like that. But I mean, I can definitely see where in other instances you're come to Easter service, come to Christmas service. I mean, those are big. A lot of times pastors are really pushing. Bring your friends to this service, and So I mean, I get it, but
I don't know. I find it's tricky to find the time to invest in doing things outside of church. I find that I have at times, I'm surprised to all of you, I'm sure, overcommitted myself.
Right. I was about to say, you are at church a lot.
Yeah.
There's a slight position opening, and Kendra's whoosh. I'll do it.
And
but
that's
it's such
the
a
era
nice
that
place
I'm
to
in.
be, though. It's a nice place to be, and nice people to be around. So,
yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just at certain times in our lives that is more true than others. But I do feel like,
it's easier when you're younger. You have more opportunities to meet people.
For sure,
you're in school. You're doing sports or theater, or you're involved in extracurricular activities. You're usually working in restaurants.
Your responsibilities are just
your responsibilities are really low. And then once you become an adult and you have a life and responsibilities, it's hard. It's hard to meet new people, and especially that have a common ground as you. So, and it's just finding I think a lot of people, if you know that you share, especially when faith is so important to you, if you share a common faith, and that's one tick in the box.
It's a starting point.
And we can start there.
Yeah, agreed. So, where do we go from here? I mean, obviously, based on what you were talking about, Kaylee, the issue is not with the Christ; it's with the Christians. And so we need to be more like Jesus.
Yeah, the actions. And when you're talking about how people think that Christians are hypocritical, I feel like in my life right now, I've been kind of hypocritical with my time.
Mhm.
Like I'm not giving my time to service like I want to, and like I have in the past. I feel like I'm in this really cushy position in my life right now, and everything's really comfortable and great. But like I want to give some more of my time to service.
Sure. I'm in the same place as well. I want to do that too.
Well, I think for both of you too, though, like you guys have both just gone through some really tumultuous times.
Right.
So the fact that if you're at a plateau right now and it's kind of smooth sailing, you're just kind of like, I mean, I like this. This is kind of nice. Like,
just for a minute.
I mean, like maybe get through the fall,
Right.
like just
Right.
enjoy the leaves, and just,
Right.
and then maybe I'll add something, another course.
Yeah.
But no, I can totally understand that, because when I got finally to a place where like things were going smoothly, I was like, I don't want to do anything. Like I just want to enjoy this. It's really nice.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I kind of got out of that, I was like, okay, now I can add some stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Add some stuff on. But I'm really good at cutting things off if I'm not. I'm really good at saying no.
Yeah.
So,
That's good. That's so healthy.
yeah.
I'm getting I'm doing it a bit.
Are you?
I am. Like, there's one thing that came up I talked to you about that I was like,
Right.
I just can't. One thing. I said no to one thing.
1 out of 13. No, I think going from here, I think it is starting to be more. I think there's a fine line where we don't want to like tokenize what we're doing. We don't want to like showboat what we're doing, like being like, oh, look, like we're volunteering here, we're doing this mission trip. And you don't want to like glamorize it, but you also like, I think it's important to share what's going on. And so I think just these simple things of maybe posting, like when you posted about our bishop saying what he said about Christian nationalism, I think posting when I think when we post things about the
Pride.
Yeah, when we go to Pride and we share our pictures of Pride.
Yeah.
With the show that we just went and saw, and we shared our thoughts and feelings about the show. And I think those are very simple ways that that people are going to start
That are authentic.
Yeah, that are authentic. I think that's what's really important.
Right.
You're not doing it to try to necessarily influence. You're just trying to do it
Or virtue signal.
Yeah, you're just trying to be like, this is
that hypocritical
who I am.
thing though, right? Where I feel called to do more service work right now, because I feel like I embrace all of these ideals, these social ideals of like, we should care about all of these other people, all of these other groups. And I'm asking myself, how am I actually doing that in my life right now?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's where I'm finding friction in myself right now, is that I feel like I'm just not doing
And I think it's baby steps. I think it's things like sharing videos.
Yeah.
And sharing memes and sharing stories and showing up to events. And if someone asks you what you believe, not trying to skirt the issue and say, well, this is what I believe. What do you believe? Yeah. And I think it's if everybody just took those little baby steps, like so much mileage would be made. And I think you would start to see kind of a shift towards the positive. And it's going to scare the status quo when they start seeing Christians actually acting Christian. Like, I think it's really going to shake the core of this country. Like, I think like it's a powerful thing to be Christ-like. And so if you have more Christians being Christ-like, what change could that create?
So powerful. So there was this social post that I ran across, when was this? Early August. And this woman posted, Jesus didn't eat with sinners and tax collectors because he wanted to appear inclusive, tolerant, and accepting. He ate with them to call them to repentance. I did not agree with that sentiment at all.
Right.
I don't know that it's about either of those.
That they were just
things,
children of God.
if I'm honest.
Yeah. Jesus
I
was
don't
like,
think
they were there.
either of those filters.
Right.
They were there, and then I was like, I was there. We just sat down together.
Like, we are all sinners.
Yeah.
Like that's something we accept as Christians, is that we're all sinners.
Yeah.
And so if
I agree with that.
any of us sits down at a table with Jesus, we're all sinners sitting down at a table with Jesus. And we're not better than anybody else that might be at that table.
No, I think because we've talked about, like, Jesus was 100% grace and 100% truth.
Yep.
So it didn't matter who you were. It didn't matter if you were a Pharisee or if you were a prostitute. Like, he was still going to come to you with 100% grace and 100% truth.
Right.
So he wasn't going to excuse what you did, but he wasn't going to condemn you for what you did either. And so to turn around and say, well, he's only going to sit with those people so that they become followers of him. That wasn't his MO. Like, that wasn't his end game. His end game was to show them what the heart of Christ, like the heart of God, looked like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was his end game.
You can't sing Christian songs in front of other people.
Can't do this.
Anyway,
Although there's probably a couple of hymns that they're not fond of. I'm not fond of them.
well, sure. There's hymns that I think all of us are probably not fond of.
They're like, not that one again.
So I think one way that I would love to see the world go from here is to stop being homophobic. We've talked about gender and how gender is becoming more fluid. The rainbow spectrum is becoming much more fluid too, and more people are embracing this idea of the rainbow. And that's not what makes it right. That's not what makes it something that we shouldn't, a reason for us not to be homophobic. But I guess it's like the idea of being on the wrong side of history, right? Like,
yeah, because you look with civil rights movement. Like, there's still a huge problem with racism in this country, and bigotry in this country, and sexism in this country. Like, let's be honest. So there's still all these major facets, and it is our job as Christians to be Christ-like and being like, he didn't see this. He didn't define a person by who they loved or what color their skin was or what genitalia they were born with. Like, that's not how he defined a person. He defined them by being a child of God, and that's all that mattered. We all bleed red. So until someone starts bleeding blue, then,
it's just not our job to judge. And I guess that's another one, like, stop being so judgmental. And I can count myself. I can turn the mirror on myself for sure. I can be judgmental about a lot of things.
Searching for those stones when you should just be stepping over them.
Absolutely. Embracing social good. So this comes back to our conversation we were just having about my desire to be of more service and activate myself in more of a social way. I'm
sorry, I just had you said
Holy Spirit activate.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Holy Spirit activate.
Oh my gosh. When Liv does, and Charlie start marching through the halls of the church singing that, I just cry laughing. It's so bad. I don't suggest that in public. That might keep people from coming to the church.
So how are we aiding our community, the world, others, just this, I think it's a thing that I'm asking myself a lot about lately. And I want to figure that out. I want to figure out how I can be of better service. And the last one that I have, I'd love to hear if you ladies have anything else too, is just actually loving others, actually loving them, actually giving people the benefit of the doubt, which I'm not always very good at. I'm not always very good at that.
It's not always the easiest thing to do.
It's not, right? I wish that it were just my default setting. I really do. There's some people who just walk through the world that way, and I wish that I had that in me.
I'm really good with like first impressions, but like based on how the first impression goes, like real quick to make up my mind.
Yeah.
So after that, it's really one of these things that I struggle with. Like, I'm really open-minded when I first meet you, and then after about 5 minutes, I'm like, I don't know if this is going to be.
I feel like you give a lot of benefit of the doubt. I feel like, don't you think she does?
Yes.
I feel like your heart is just giant.
Well, I think it's just. I think I'm very good at pretending to be civil. That's what I think. That's what that is. I think it's just really good at keeping my mouth shut at particular times, and then the door closes, and I'm like, oh my Can you believe what that person just said? My parents would tell you that I'm a very judgmental person and it's genetic. So, no, I think it's because I've gone through so much and I was judged so harshly myself that I do tend to give people the benefit of the doubt in a first meeting.
Okay.
And I will try to, if it's a bad first meeting, I try to justify the situation. Maybe they're just having a bad day. But if the second meeting goes the same, I'm not going to try to induce a third. So, and if our paths cross, I'm not going to go out of my way we've talked about it. Like, you're going to be friends, you're going to be friendly to everyone. You're just not going to get the closest seat to me.
Right.
So I 100% agree with that. I have no problem being Southern and friendly, but like, as far as doing something where I have to then give away my time and
I'm not trying to waste my energy in creating conflict with somebody.
I don't want to go in.
I'm not going to give.
If I have
any
a
of
free
myself here.
moment, like if I find childcare and I'm going to go spend money and I'm going to go spend some time like away from my responsibilities, I'm going to have a good time.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to purposely, this is why dating for me is so difficult. So I'm like, I don't know if I'd have it's not a guarantee that I'm going to have a good time
Yeah.
if I go out on this date. However, I know if I go out with my girlfriends and I have a couple of glasses of wine, I'm going to have a great time. So I'd much rather do that than risk having a terrible time.
The ROI is there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think about with Christians a lot and just being more Christ-like. Like, what do you gain by judging others? Like, what do you gain by judging them? What do you gain by being homophobic? Like, what does it do for you? Honestly, like ask yourself, but I'm also asking myself, not on the homophobia front, because that's not a thing for me, but on a lot of the others, what do you gain? Do you think it gets you some additional points on the scoreboard in heaven? Doesn't.
It doesn't make
It makes people
flame
feel like they're better.
Yeah, it doesn't make your flame burn brighter.
Yeah. And honestly, if there are score points up there, which there aren't, but if there were, you'd probably get them taken away for that. So stop it.
I think I would love to do an episode sometime about sexual sins, because I think there's so many that are just glossed over in the Bible. Like, we hone in on homosexuality, but there's a ton. The Bible talks about fornication over and over and over again, and nobody talks about that one.
It's so true. Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, that would be a really interesting episode, actually.
Yeah.
I'm busy that episode.
Well, that's what I don't really want to do.
Revisit my past there.
Wait, like 5 years from now.
Hey, episode 200.
Right.
Well, like, I don't know if this is a sexual sin, but it's weird. How about when, what was it, Jacob made all of those guys in Canaan circumcise themselves, and then his sons killed them all? Like, that's kind of
Bible's so weird.
Random, but if you want more of that, stay tuned.
That'll be on the next
episode.
random episode. We'll bring that one up again.
So with that, are you unchristian? I guess that's what I'd leave us all with. Like, how are we unchristian in our lives? How can we be more like the Christ?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Have a great week, you guys.
Bye.
See you next week. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Messy Christian Mamas. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, and Instagram. Until next time, embrace the mess, share the love, and shine your light bright, my friends.